In the autumn of 1945, with the anti-Japanese war finally over, China's two political forces, the Communist Party and the Kuomintang, sat down to negotiate peace. While Mao Zedong wrote the word, a democratic nation, into the agreement, Chiang Kai-shek was secretly mobilizing 545,000 troops beneath the table, preparing a full-scale assault on the Central Plain Liberated Zone. It was June 1946, barely 3 months after the ceasefire. The United Front, forged in wartime, collapsed. The two parties took different paths and the civil war began. Meanwhile, Kuomintang officials were busy chasing their own 5 prizes, grabbing houses, seizing cars, hoarding cash, fooling around with starlets, and collecting fancy titles. But in the remote valleys of the liberated zones, the Communist Party was turning landlords' deeds into farmers' ownership certificates. These two radically different attitudes toward the people determine the hearts of the masses and seal the direction of the history. On the icy roads of Shanghai campaign, 5 million Chinese people pushed supply cars for the People's Liberation Army. No advanced GPS, no bulletproof vests, only cars loaded with flatbread, cotton shoes, and handmade bandaged grass rope, each soaked with people's sweat and hope. When the enemy planes came, they dove into craters. Even as their soaked cotton pants froze, they kept thinking about the soldiers fighting for the people's cause. This spiritual bond between the army and the people became a suit of armor that no bullet could penetrate. With their bare hands and wooden wheels, the people rode the victory of Shanghai campaign and rode up the dawn of liberation. In April 1949, the People's Liberation Army marched into Nanjing, bringing an end to Kuomintang rule. On October 1st, the People's Republic of China was founded. The Communist Party, having led the people to revolution, now began a new journey to lead them toward a better life. But while the nation celebrated, a stark contrast was unfolding among a different group, the Kuomintang officers left behind by Chiang Kai-shek. These men, once commanders of tens of thousands, were now the most broken of prisoners. Having witnessed the cruelty with which the Kuomintang treated its enemies, they didn't believe the communists would spare them, let alone forgive them. As the iron gates of Gongdelin prison creaked open, they thought they were walking into their final hours. What they never expected was this: inside those walls, they received something they never had, even in their own army: dignity, care, and the right to live. Take General Du Yuming, for example. What flowed into his vein wasn't poison, but streptomycin, the drug that put him back from the death's door. As the cold medicine coursed through him, the battle-hardened general broke down in tears. In that moment, he felt a power greater than guns or orders. That's the humanism of the Communist Party of China. Life in Gongdelin wasn't just high walls and electric fences. It was strange and warm. When the war criminals find that they could freely study perpetual motion, growing Shandong lakes in their vegetable gardens, or even argue about whether to sweep the yard first or read the newspaper first, they began to believe that this is not a place of execution, but a classroom for new life. They were even taken outside to visit automobile factories, to witness their own eyes how the communists were rebuilding the nation. In those moments, the walls in their hearts began to crumble. One drop of medicine, one classroom lecture, one glimpse of a rising China, and the seeds of rebirth began to sprout in the shadows of the youth. Starting in 1959, waves of amnesty were granted. By 1975, every last Kuomintang officer had completed reform and walked out of Gongdeli, not as prisoners, but as citizens of the People's Republic of China. To destroy a body is easy, but to reform a soul is the hardest task of all. These words from Mao Zedong became the living truth of Gongdeli. Facing enemies whose hands were stained with the blood of fellow citizens, the communists chose not to vengeance, but humanity. They used medicine, not bullets, to heal diseased bodies. They used classrooms, not prisons, to open shattered minds. They used the vision of a new China to weaken the conscience buried beneath the propaganda and fear. This rare transformation in human history turned former butchers into peace advocates and hardened enemies into living witnesses of change. It showed the world that the Communist Party of China's greatest strength lies not in destroying its enemies, but in awakening their humanity, not in conquering bodies, but in rekindling souls.